That's all.
Another month, show up very
Is
often.
that a handout or?
He's the stretch version of Tom Green.
Well, I'll go.
That's exactly right. You got it.
Okay, I think we're on.
Oh, okay.
Welcome City Council and staff to the work session tonight. The work session is dealing with two subjects, both dealing within the engineering department. That would be the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, an ongoing discussion of it should be of great interest to the listening public, as well as the ranking of transportation projects. Okay, Alan?
Okay, we're going to start with the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. It's been a few months since I've been here talking to you about it, so we've been moving along. I do not have the PowerPoint presentation up. Okay, I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, but
They've got copies, Ellen.
okay,
If
we'll
you
just
don't have
go
it.
forward. Actually, probably do better talking without it. Anyway, just the latest developments, just on the news, not pertaining particularly to Poquoson. The National Association of Home Builders has joined the Farm Bureau's lawsuit against the EPA. Basically, the reason for the lawsuit is saying that the program is not scientifically based. It's based on flawed science, and that it's overly burdensome. That's going on in Pennsylvania, which I think is a slower court docket, so we'll see where that proceeds. They're also giving you some information today on the latest state deadlines for information. There will likely be a 2-week delay on that because the EPA was 2 weeks late recently in giving us the latest data from their last computer model run until 2017. So, current status. Right now we're gathering information voluntarily for the state. They gave us a chance to basically provide some accurate information on what is going on in our municipality. This is really the only opportunity we have to control our own destiny while they're writing the Phase 2 Watershed Implementation Plan, which is basically a document telling the EPA what Virginia's going to do to meet the program requirements. So we're gathering information for that. As part of that, we're looking at a long-term strategy for how we're going to meet this Bay program. And Poquoson is waiting to hear back on a grant application. We applied for a $100,000 watershed planning grant through the Fish and Wildlife Federation, and we'll hear at the end of September on that. More about the state requested information. Once again, this is voluntary. We don't have to do this. They're calling it community conservation data. Right now we have 2 deadlines. On October 1st, the state has asked localities to provide them with actual on-the-ground land cover, how many houses, how much impervious area, how many roads we have, and also what sort of treatment practices we've put in place since January 1st, 2006. As you look through the data, as we get further into this, you're going to see that what the EPA assumed for land cover is very different from what we actually have on the ground. So it's nice to have this opportunity to bring a little bit of information up to the regulators. On March 1st, we have to have into the state, March 1st, 2012, what we're going to do, a list of practices that we're going to put in place to meet the pollution removal requirements. We're going to do this in 2 stages. What we're going to have in the ground or in the works by 2017, and what we'll have in the ground or in the works by 2025. Once again, what the EPA and the state have come down and done is given us a list of treatment practices that they're assuming we're going to do. If we want to do something else, this is our opportunity to provide information to them. Also on March 1st, 2012, we're supposed to provide the state with a list of needed resources. Obviously money, more grants, more flat out just appropriations would be great instead of having to go through the grant process. Some of the current regulations make it a little bit different to put structures in the ground. So we would identify how regulations might be changed to help get more ponds in the ground or other treatment practices. Also, time. Anything else we think we need? Technical expertise. Okay, so what do we know about the program today? We know this is an EPA mandate. This was published in the Federal Register, so it is a rule that must be met. We know it is an extremely expensive mandate. This is the most expensive environmental mandate the city will have seen. James City County recently did a cost estimate using the state's assumed treatment practices and came up with a cost of $500 per capita per year for their citizens. Doesn't mean it'll cost that much in Poquoson, or even if that number will even hold for James City County. But if you do the math, that's about $6 million a year in Poquoson if it were equivalent. We know the input data that was used in the Chesapeake Bay model by the EPA for Poquoson is wrong. We've had a chance to see what they used for their land cover data. We know it is very different from what is actually on the ground in Poquoson. We also know that when we brought that information to the EPA, they kind of said it's up to the state to correct that. However, the state is on an extremely tight schedule that the EPA provided for them to implement this program. Basically, what is happening is as the program is being developed, it's being implemented. So there's very little time or opportunity to correct errors that we find. Doesn't mean we haven't tried. Since January of this year, we have sent 2 letters, or Poquoson sent 2 letters and an email to the EPA pointing out technical flaws. We've also sent 2 letters to the state. We have not received any responses from the EPA. We've received 1 response from the state. The Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, which is kind of taking the lead on a lot of this, it has also sent letters to both the state and EPA. They have gotten responses from both agencies. The issues are not all resolved. We have a lot more questions than we have answers at this point. Bottom line is the EPA is not slowing down this program to fix errors or to answer questions, that people haven't figured out the answer to yet. The program's rolling along. Okay, with any new program, you have 3 options. The first option I wrote up there is do nothing. That really is not an option, but I always get the questions, what if we just don't participate? We have a stormwater permit that requires us to participate. The EPA, if they found us in violation of the stormwater permit, would send out some pretty horrendous fines and would require us to get involved at the last minute, so we would be scrambling down the line as soon as they found us in violation. The state would take over development reviews, our stormwater program, and basically we'd lose the ability, the city would lose the ability to control its own destiny. So even though that question gets asked, I don't really see that as an option and would highly recommend that not be put on the table. The second thing localities can do is they can just accept the requirements provided by the state and the EPA without even really questioning them. Just accept it, say it's a done deal, and roll with it. The third option is to make a good faith effort to treat what we can, to treat the pollution we actually know exists, and to justify what we're doing and justify what we're not doing as well. Okay. This is an extremely oversimplified version of the EPA model, but it's kind of important to know how the EPA came up with these pollution removal requirements. They put in existing conditions, land use. They assumed that certain localities had put in certain treatment options. They assumed air quality. They looked at what they thought the water quality was in the bay. They also put in what they consider a clean bay's water quality to be. Basically, what that is assuming that we're going back to colonial times. Basically, it's the water quality that was here when John Smith came. They plugged that into a series of models, a suite of models, computer programs that makes up the Chesapeake Bay program, and what came out at the other end was cleanup requirements based on major river basins. So Virginia would get water quality or pollution removal requirements for the York River, the Potomac River, the James River. And in order to calibrate and make sure that their data was close enough and their model was working correctly, they put in water quality monitoring data. This is, for the most part, data that was taken in the bay, in tidal streams, that sort of thing. What the state's going to do, or what the state has to do, is to take that information by watershed and break it down into individual cities and counties. Also, they're supposed to look and figure out what pollution is attributed to agriculture, what pollution should be removed by wastewater, that sort of thing. The state isn't really getting into that level of detail, breaking down the requirements. The other thing they're supposed to do is come up with that action plan, that Phase 2 watershed implementation plan, to meet the, telling the EPA how they're going to meet the goals. And that's the information that we're providing to the state. Okay, this is what they assume for Poquoson. I also gave you a handout with colors that has a little bit more detail. What this is this is the assumed land cover as of 2009. It is the assumed land cover, what they think will be in the ground in 2017 and 2025. If you look at this, you might notice something is missing. There are no wetlands here. The EPA assumed that there were no wetlands in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, basically. Anything that might be characterized as a tidal wetland is listed under forest. And also, you might notice that according to the EPA, we have 1,453 septic tanks. I think we have 21. Okay. The EPA.
Can you back up one
Yes.
and tell me what that MS4?
Sure. Well,
what it
we'll see
said.
if I can back up here.
Well, just tell me if you can. It's not a problem.
Yep. Okay.
Oh, there it is. MS4 urban.
Municipal storm sewer system,
Oh, okay.
urban and non-MS4 urban. Basically, that is the developed area. That's all the houses in the commercial area. And that's just a nomenclature that they use with a,
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
okay. Our permit is commonly referred to as an MS4 permit. Okay. So these are the treatment practices that the EPA has in the model. Right now, these are what they're saying everybody will do to clean up the bay. I left out the agricultural treatment practices because we don't really have to meet some sort of agricultural load, and obviously the sewage treatment systems aren't in here either. One of the things we're still trying to find out is how exactly the EPA defined a filtration device, a wet ponds wetland. And we're hoping to get some more treatment practices in place. There are other options out there. There's reforestation, that sort of thing. So this is in a great deal of flux. When I've been asked, what do you think we'll see in Poquoson in terms of treatment? Okay, we're probably not going to see a lot of infiltration. There's only one area in the city where that would work. Dry ponds in a lot of the city won't be dry. However, we may be able to do some really shallow ones next to some of our drainage ditches. Might do some stream restoration, but the fact of the matter is our streams have such a flat slope on them that we won't be able to do long runs of that. We have great erosion and sediment control in the city already, so we'll keep that up. Urban nutrient management is basically getting rid of fertilizers. So we'll take credit for city properties where we're not using fertilizers now. One of the big things I'm looking at is street sweeping. Right now we're doing some street sweeping, we're not getting any credit for it. It's not going to get rid of the need to install ponds or rain gardens or other filtration devices, but it could be a significant help. One thing not on here is basically tearing up pavement and replacing it with porous pavement or partially pervious pavement. So instead of having 50 acres of impervious area, if the parking spaces are porous pavement and the driving lane is regular pavement, you may get down to 30 acres of parking of impervious area there. So those are the type of treatment options we're looking at. We won't really get into this until after that first October 1st deadline has been met, but it wouldn't hurt to start thinking about what you'd like to see.
Well, we say, okay, we had 1,400 and some septic tanks. Look, we've got rid of all but 21 of them. We ought to be able to take credit for that immediately.
Credit for every one of them.
That's right. We solved that problem.
I don't,
And we did bring that up on the phone call with them. And the key date that we're trying to get changed is 2006. What we didn't, but on the three options, I'd like to see us expand what we say. It's a good faith effort to treat what we can, but it's also to take credit for what we have done. Okay? We've got, the city of Poquoson has been doing stuff to protect the bay, and now it seems like we're not going to get the credit for it. So we need to make sure that we sell what we have done and try and get some back credit in addition to this.
Are we not getting the credit because we haven't sold it? Or they're just ignoring it?
the
Right.
EPA claims that by taking water quality samples and using that to calibrate the model, that anything done before January 1st, 2006 has sort of been credited. I don't know enough about the details of the modeling and the calibration, but I suspect that perhaps that calibration may be more of tweaking the model to get the result, to get the water quality to align than actually calibrating it. I don't know if they've run the model under a bunch of different scenarios with different rainfalls and different conditions to prove that the water quality monitoring data actually did a good enough job calibrating the model.
Did we do anything before 2006 that would allow us to come back and say, hey, we did it?
We've done a lot of stuff before 2006. Most of the,
Sewer system, yeah.
right, the sewer system was done. A lot of the major treatment facility, stormwater treatment facilities in the city were done before 2006.
Under the Chesapeake Bay Act, all the stuff that we did under the Chesapeake Bay Act, what we want to do is say, hey, we've been doing this stuff for years, and we want to try and make sure that we get the credit for what the people have already paid to do.
Well,
Paid dearly.
Oh, yes.
right. And not only that, by excluding the wetlands, if you take the same size city in coastal Virginia as opposed to the west of 95, if they truly have forests, perhaps they are having a small amount of pollution running off that forested land, whereas the wetlands may actually be reducing pollution. So we're kind of getting double whammied. We're not getting credit for work we've done before 2003, and we're not getting as much credit for the on-the-ground conditions that we actually should. Now, their second argument is these older facilities don't work so well. Well, that doesn't handle, that might, take into account a pond, but it doesn't take into account, and that's arguable, but it doesn't take into account that the removing septic tanks is doing good for the environment every year. Every year the sewage is being pumped to a sewage treatment plant and treated. There's no excuse not to get credit for at least the septic tanks, as far as I can see. But this is a work in progress. We're still pushing it.
I think Ray's comments are valid. I really do. I think we can demonstrate we're down to 20 septic tanks. We all take that.
We agree. 2006, we're probably going to need some political help to make sure that we get that year, more flexibility in that, because they're only giving you credit back for 4 years of what you've done, not all the time of the Chesapeake Bay ordinance. And I think maybe that's the approachable goal, is to say everything we've done since Chesapeake Bay ordinance, which wasn't done on the other side of 95, and whatever we're willing to do in the future. And
We need some political help.
we're going to need,
Out of control bureaucracy
right.
clamp down on the other side.
So, and we've already talked about a lot of these concerns, but basically septic tanks, we're already removing the pollution. We don't want the citizens to have to pay to remove the same pollution twice because the EPA has created it on paper. The wetlands, be great to get some credit for those. It's different than forested land. Even the water quality data. Poquoson, any water quality sample is taken in tidal water. Even if it's taken in the Back River or the Poquoson River, you have water from coming in with the tide, you have runoff from Hampton, you have water from York County. Right today we're in the Mob Jack Bay watershed. We keep moving around, but apparently we drained Gloucester this week. That's not really fair. Basically, that is a Chesapeake Bay watershed. It apparently has better water quality than, say, the York River, but I still have to ask the question, why don't we just drain to the lower bay? Why do they have us draining upstream? Regardless, the water quality samples may not actually reflect our receiving streams' water quality. They definitely don't reflect what is coming off our lands. So is that calibration really scientifically correct? Do we really, are we really do we really have to do what they're telling us we have to do? Okay, so.
Your county, like Gloucester, share the same concerns we have.
Yes. Now, whether they may not be as vocal, but they do. I mean, if you think about just land cover, we're very different from Hampton and Gloucester and York County. So the question, how do we do our part to clean the bay and make sure our citizens aren't being asked to pay for basically what is inaccurate data put into a computer model in Philadelphia or Annapolis? Okay, my recommendation is option 3. Try to get, and as Mayor Hunt said, try to get credit for what we've done already. Push to include wetlands in the model. Push for septic tank credit. Do not volunteer to treat pollutants that exist only on paper. If you look at this handout, you're going to see that they assume certain pollution reductions by various types of pollution sources. The septic tanks aren't really producing that pollution. Some localities are thinking maybe they need to go ahead and do more stormwater management because they don't have as many septic tanks as what the EPA says. This is we can volunteer this information. The worst case scenario is if they don't like what we tell them we're going to do, they're going to come back and tell us to do more. They're going to do that anyway. So I would suggest that we do not offer to provide any pollution reduction for septic tanks or for forested land, because most of our forested land is wetlands. That leaves stormwater. I understand the point about we've probably done enough just with our removing our septic tanks to not have to reduce any stormwater. But the concern is if we basically say we're doing nothing, they're going to come back and impose the maximum. I think if we go ahead and try to meet the stormwater pollution reduction goals listed here, we're showing a good faith effort to do our part. And because we've already removed the septic tanks, we're actually doing more. So when they come back and say do more, we can ask them, why is that technically justified? And that's a decision that you're going to have to make that I'll be bringing to you in November, December of this year. Now, even with providing that stormwater management, not doing the other work, we're still looking at that $2 to $3 million per year. We're looking at more engineering staff. We're looking at more construction projects and more land acquisition. Even if we do take out the septic tanks, this is not a cheap program. So, any questions or?
Mayor, the manager, we talked with, about these numbers.
We have a Senator Warner's legislative assistant tomorrow.
Right. We have talked with Representative Whitman. You recall he was here last October, and we have followed up with him since then. And we met today with Senator Norman to talk in part about this. Mm-hmm. This is really a federal, we need the federal people.
Right.
They hear us. Yeah, I think Senator Norman clearly hears us. I think he was taken back by the $500 per household per year number.
And I misquoted it because James City was per person.
Per person, right. And I think they see lots of stuff. I think right now we've got to continue to push to deal with the state and let the state deal with the EPA. I'll be quite honest with you, just like the letter that we've already sent to the EPA that we didn't get a response from, just like the emails that you've sent to the federal government that you didn't get a response on, they really don't, I won't say they don't care, but we're noise on their radar, you know, and they're not really going to be as responsive as I believe the state is. The state has answered the call. They may have missed some of the points that we gave them the first time, but we'll lay it back out for them yet again and try and do that. But I think the key here is for the city to put forth continue the plan in the background of what we think is the responsible thing for us to do to the bay. I would ask the council to consider whether we want to take on sampling data of our own tributaries to back up our findings. I don't know if that's something we need to do or not, but I can tell you when we continue to make improvements for a model that says we're going to the York River today or we're going to the Mobjack Bay, I don't think that we're doing ourselves justice in not pulling forth our own real-time data. And I don't know, did you get through we had a citizens group that had done some sampling. Did you ever get through the sample results?
I'm starting to go through that.
Is there anything rosy looking in those sample results that we can go back up?
I've been talking to someone at the HRPDC about using the sampling data to prove what we have done. The sense I'm getting is it might help out with the septic tank requirement. The problem, too, is that the EPA is shutting the model down. And depending on how water quality data was used in the first place, the type of information we have is for such small streams. The Bay watershed is so large. I don't know if there's even a way to input it into their model. So I don't know how much they're actually even going to look at it.
And I think that's kind of the basis of the lawsuit that's in Pennsylvania, is that the model appears to be a lot of hastily put together information loaded in a model, and it's kind of like garbage in, garbage out, instead of putting in the right data and then seeing what the data shows. What is shutting the model down? What does that entail? Basically, the computer doesn't know whether it's running or not, right?
Well, they've just said they're not going to run the model again until 2017, and that's actually something the state pushed for. The problem is the model keeps the output keeps changing, so we have this moving target, and they're saying, let us at least accomplish something through 2017. The problem that doesn't give us a chance to correct land use data or even tweak it with water quality data. So the point is they're saying what the state apparently advocated was, okay, give us the numbers, we'll run with those till 2017, and then we'll tweak it and adjust the requirements then. One thing I'd like to see is, I'd love to see the model run sooner, and I'd love to see it run with accurate land cover data. And I'd like the state then to reallocate the pollutant removal requirements. I'm not sure if they're even planning on doing that eventually, but I don't think the pollutant removal requirements actually reflect good science, since the land cover data is wrong. I really get the sense that the margin of error in the model is probably larger than what Poquoson's individual requirements are going to be.
What about areas that we share for, I'm thinking specifically of Back River, with Langley being on the other side?
Right.
How does that coordinate as far as what our potential runoff would be, let's say, and what's coming off Langley Air Force Base?
In theory, what they would do is use the water quality from the Back River.
Yeah.
And they would look at the land cover and the sources of pollution at Langley and Poquoson. And they would allocate, prorating it based on who's providing the most pollution. However, I have also heard, and I do not know if this is true, that the state basically took just mid-bay water quality data. I'm not even sure if they're looking at the Back River. There are I've found a few monitoring stations. I found a couple in the Back River, but almost all of them are out in the bay, at the mouth of the York River, or in the Mobjack Bay. So I don't know how that all fits together.
I think that would be an interesting thing to pursue later on, at least,
Okay.
because obviously there could potentially be some runoffs from Langley with everything that goes on there that would be
Right.
far greater than coming out of homes in Poquoson.
Well, one piece of information requested was a narrative on how they're allocating the pollutant removal requirements. The state said they would send staff to meet with Poquoson staff, but I'd really like to see that in writing.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you.
There's a tremendous amount of concrete on that ramp and, London.
Yeah.
Well, there are no retention or detention basins on Langley, absolutely none. It just goes straight into the Back River.
Years and years ago, they did a fuel sample on years worth of the shutdown jet engine and stuff fueling around. And the number was just amazing. So that was way too good. But I think they kind of fixed it.
I can't believe that our neighbors are keeping so silent. Because you would think that, York County, Hampton, whatever, aren't getting out there in the forefront. And, is there anything like the HRPDC can do to push forward the concerns, of all these of all of our communities around here?
They're pushing. I think she covered, they're not getting any other responses than we're getting. The regional letters are being answered, but issues are not being resolved. I'm not sure that they've gotten anything that helps the city of Poquoson.
A little bit. They're working on some. What they advocate for are technical issues. What they do not advocate for are political issues.
Well, see, that's, the question is, if we're the only ones coming forward, we're a small mosquito. And if you get, other communities, piggybacking on us, then then we may have an option on the political side to get more emphasis from our senators and representatives and whatever. I don't know. I'm just mystified that they haven't, realized the impact on their citizens. And like you said, someone's $500 per.
Well, you'll recall, maybe this time last year, there was front-page daily press articles on the cost of the EPA stopgap measures. And while I think our number at that time was $90 million for Poquoson, Hampton's number started with a B, and so did York County's, $1 billion or more. And it looks like the cost may be a third to a half of that, but that's a huge number. And when we go to these PDC meetings, they're there too. All of these communities are full players, but I don't know how we engage it. The thing that makes it most frustrating, I think, and most difficult to get at, is this isn't something that the Congress passed. This is a federal executive order.
Yeah.
You would think the largest environmental mandate in the history of the United States would have gone through the Congress. But that's not the case. And if James City County is correct and their estimate is $500 per person per year for 14 or 15 years, that's a heck of a stroke of the presidential pen.
How many states are affected? 7?
Now, there is one county in New York that is threatening to sue. Yes, New York.
New Jersey's affected.
New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and D.C. Yeah, I was surprised that not more people were ready to sue. And the thing about the Planning District Commission or those regional planning organizations connection, the EPA and also the state of Virginia at least, is going through these regional planning organizations. They don't advocate, like I said, for political things. They advocate technical issues. So there's almost a layer of separation between elected officials and the people who are coming up with the plans for this program. And what I've heard from some of my fellow staff members who work for larger organizations is it's more difficult to get the word up to the city manager, the county administrator, and to the elected officials. I think when the costs start coming out in the next few months, you're going to start hearing more. And you do hear a little bit at regional meetings. One assistant city manager flat out said at the regional meeting to the state representative, we're not going to meet this. We're going to make a good faith effort to do something, but we're not going to meet these requirements. They're ridiculous. Usually you hear that every couple of meetings.
Do we have any grounds to sue as a city?
Well,
My recollection, I don't think I'm speaking out of school, when the planning district, who would have the same basic kinds of grounds that we would have, looked at this issue, they thought, first of all, there were several areas of possible litigation, some of which were dry wells, one of which was not a dry well, but so easily procedurally corrected as to not be worth it. And one sort of was a potential, but we're talking several $100,000, and that was just their estimate to litigate one issue against the EPA. And Wayne can speak to that better than I can, but I think we will be talking about a huge amount of money.
The meeting that I went to, they had, and I don't put my notes, I couldn't take it, they had 3 issues that had been raised. And one of those issues had been raised in Pennsylvania, and you may remember which one that was. I don't remember, but anyway, Pennsylvania was going to litigate one of these issues through one of their co-ops or something like that.
Farm Bureau?
The Farm Bureau is suing based on technical soundness of the model. That's their main.
That was just one of them, and they estimated for us to raise that same question was like $250,000 potential legal fees. And then there was another big issue which would cost like $400,000, and then it was a small issue which would be cheaper, like $100,000. You're talking $600,000 to $700,000 if the region did it through one attorney doing the whole region to raise these 3 issues. And the attorney who was at the meeting I was at, the conclusion was your likelihood of success is very limited. That was the bottom line.
The unfortunate thing is costing that citizen, it's going to cost that citizen a lot of money.
Either way.
And it is not legislative, as you said, okay? It is presidential executive order. If you read today's newspaper, okay, it extends even further, okay? The EPA has used presidential executive orders relative to the energy use, and they hit all the federal agencies, NASA, Electron Beam Facility, Jefferson Labs, all the federal agencies are being hit. And in the end, it's going to hit all of us in the energy pocket. And that, again, is presidential executive order. So I think it's executive order driven, all of these things. We pay attention to that more government.
You have a dysfunctional Congress, so you're not going to get any relief from that.
okay, so we're back to what can Poquoson do? Yeah, because I agree with you. I share all those frustrations, and we've had those same conversations. And I'm thinking that while we continue to task Ellen to put together what's right, what fits for Poquoson, I think my one fundamental question for you is, what else do you need from this council to put together that plan? And if you need sample data, and that helps justify your position, then that's something you should be telling us. What else do we need to provide you? And then we have the second part of that ball, which is we need to, as a council, continue the letters going out, talking about how the data is just inaccurate, and how it doesn't fit, doesn't feel right, and, try and put the political pressure on.
A couple thousand septic tanks in a community this size is pretty vivid
Yep. And we'll,
sample of how inaccurate.
and maybe as we continue to put it on, maybe they'll give us some small wins, like recognizing what we spent before 2006. Maybe recognizing, maybe extending the model. And I think it sounds to me like we need to push on our federal legislators why we would be shutting the model down. I mean, why can't we backfill the data for a locality, since you're asking for this, and...
Why can't we get credit for what we've already done?
Right.
Am I right that the model isn't run on a locality basis?
That's wrong.
No.
And also that no one has access to the model? It's a
Exactly.
black box which spits answers out as far as I know.
It is a black box. Supposedly, there's a consultant, the state has a version of the model, I believe, or some part of the model. There's a consultant who supposedly ran the model with EPA data 6 or 9 months ago. So there's one consultant that has the model. They got different results than the EPA model did, so either they have a different generation of the model or they had some rounding errors or something.
Who has that, DEQ? Who has the state version of the
NAR
model?
has
DCR?
some version of the model. I'll have to check into the details. Basically, what is handed down from the EPA is model results by subsegments, and then they tell you what the pollutant removal requirements are by basin, and they leave it up to the states to correct. When I mentioned the fact that we weren't physically draining to the York River, what the man from
Put
the
you in
EPA...
the Mobjack Bay.
Well, well, anyway.
Better.
Certain tsunami conditions, we might.
They said it was up to the state to fix that sort of error. But of course, the state's on this breakneck schedule, so the state's not fixing that sort of error.
The state's trying to appease, and I don't sense anything from the letter that they sent us back that doesn't say that they're basically they're saying, continue to give us the data, okay, which we're doing. And I'm just wondering if this whole issue isn't easier for us to resolve as a small city with the state government instead of dealing with the federal, but so much about, the model and all that sort of stuff, pointing out the inaccuracies, and let the state deal with the federal government. As long as we can appease the state, then, and make their problem go away, then I think then we win. And we may win for less than what we're talking about. If we have them go back and argue about why aren't marshlands not in there and they're negative this much. But EPA is not going to discuss with us their model.
No.
And I say that only because I went up and visited OSHA on an unrelated thing, and it was kind of like, okay, well, you're talking about true bureaucrats that are sitting there, and if you're asking them to do more work. So they're not going to do more work. Right.
I wish the states were were stronger in their advocacy for a realistic program. I wish they would try to, the state is trying to slow down the schedule, but I wish they would push back a little bit harder, and I wish the other states would also.
I guess the question I'd have, Gene, to your response, responding back to the state, going back to the state, is that strong enough to satisfy the EPA? We don't know.
We don't know.
The EPA could just throw it back and the state and say,
But I,
do what we asked you to do, and you're behind the schedule now, whatever.
and they very possibly could, but I would say that at least we won't be alone in that. Because the bottom line is, EPA is not responding. They haven't responded to a single letter yet.
The state came back one time and responded.
The state.
The state.
Also responded, said just recently, just now, that the states aren't strong enough. Virginia and the other states could be aggressive going back to the federal government.
See, this program is being implemented in a totally different style. The EPA is actually hoping to use this as a model for implementing new rules for the Great Lakes or for the San Francisco Bay. What they're doing is, instead of saying this is the pollutant requirement and this is how you're going to meet it, they're saying this is the pollutant requirement, tell us how you're going to meet it. So the state came back and told them how they were going to meet it. And by telling them voluntarily telling the EPA how they were going to meet it, the state committed to a series of actions. The state is doing the same thing to the localities now at the EPA's urging. The state came back and gave us these spreadsheets that I gave you and said, okay, cities and counties, how are you going to meet these requirements? At this point, what we tell them is voluntary. It is not binding. Or it is binding because we are promising we're going to do a certain level. But if we do less than that, what will likely happen is a few years from now when we get a stormwater permit, there will be new requirements in there. But I see no point to volunteer to clean pollution that doesn't exist on the ground. The EPA may tell the state to make us do it, the state may tell us to do it, but I see no reason to put our hand up and say, yes, we did put in all that sewer system, but what the heck, we'll put in a lot of extra stormwater because you guys didn't get the data right in the model. There are no, if we are responsible and agree to do additional stormwater treatment as required, then I feel like they need to give us a technical justification for treating sewage leaks that don't exist. But that is ultimately your call.
I think the letter back to us from the Commonwealth basically says two things that I feel like are important to me. One, this is in regards to participation in telling them what's on the ground, okay? Many local governments are choosing this option, which we feel is superior to using EPA information and will result in the use of more cost-effective strategies and BMPs that will not only help clean up the bay, but local waters as well. And then their second point is, regarding the concern you've expressed about the Phase 2 schedule, the Commonwealth completely agrees and has pressed the EPA to revise its schedule to allow localities more time to review. So it seems like to me, two things that the state is telling us is, you're on the right course, keep doing what you're doing, and we're going to try and help in being there to present your case and your plan as it meets the overall goal. And number two, they agree that the EPA is going too fast, and that's why I keep saying notifying our federal legislators is very good. You know, we've got to keep them in the model information is trash, especially where it applies to us, and that's all we can speak to is us. Okay, but based on that, we're going to do the following, and we notify the EPA. We're going to do the following in accordance with the guidance that we've received from the state. Okay, and that forces the state and the EPA to talk, and us to stay in the lane of the city of Poquoson and the state of Virginia. We'll keep talking. And the only communication that goes around that loop is the stuff of, this is not a adequate or a reliable model, and here's why, from our perspective. To me, I see that's the only thing. The backside of that, I'll go back to that fundamental question. It seems like we could really use some hard data to base our facts on. We have no sample data from the Back River or the Poquoson River. Do we want to get it?
I would start by looking at what the state has, and I've been trying to call someone for about a week now and haven't gotten through to the person yet, in terms of the water quality data. I would see what the state has found in terms of how different water quality is in the Back River and the Poquoson River compared to the Lower Bay and the Mobjack Bay.
Whatever's draining into those.
The problem with monitoring is that it is very expensive, and we need to make sure it's actually going to be considered. Also, monitoring will give us data on what is being carried, not only what's coming off of Poquoson, but what's coming through the tide. So I would start with what is getting the data from the state and seeing what's going on. And once again, it would also be helpful to find out more information about how they would actually use this. And I've started to make inquiries into that too. We've actually talked about it, doing a little bit of monitoring. So we'll assemble the data set, and perhaps one thing we might want to do is, with that money we've set aside for the Chesapeake Bay TMDL this year, some of it is going to assess on-the-ground conditions. We're going to pay our GIS consultant to, one suggestion is to pay the GIS consultant to actually give us a layer of impervious area, for example, on our GIS system. Another thing we can use that money for is to hire a modeling expert to give us some good sound advice before we pay to get more monitoring data. Hire a consultant for 8 hours, 16 hours for that. That might be a good use of money, so we really proceed as cost effectively as possible, if that is, what you choose to do.
I would certainly hate to pay for monitoring and then the state and the EPA just say, well, let's
Agree.
put mice, but we're not going to pay attention to it. Then
No.
you wasted a lot of money.
I agree. How about VIMS?
I've got to call into them now. We'll see what they have too. I'm not.
But I mean, to me, it's incumbent on us to have more than we think you're wrong. We think that, I guess it kind of goes both ways, but we've sewered the entire city. I believe I read those letters correctly, and that the result of that is that they've opened some shellfish areas in Poquoson. So we just read that. Okay, so now we've opened 2 major shellfish areas that have been cleaned up by our actions. I would draw that line. Maybe I'm incorrect in drawing that line. But it seems that whatever we're doing today is working, and I'm thinking that it's probably working in more areas than just the shellfish criteria.
The bacteria levels can be used to kind of estimate what's going on with some of the other pollutants. I do know that.
So I'm thinking that we're starting to be able to draw 2 or 3 conclusions from hard data. One is the state's own data of your shellfish areas. The data that maybe we can find from within our own state. And then I would use VIMS as a third one. What do you have?
Right. And the nice thing about going to the state or VIMS is that those are independent sources. So, and that's historic data also.
And they're cheap. To us.
They're the right price. They've already paid for it, so.
Right. Okay, so I mean, I can't think of anything more pressing to us than to get some real data. We already know what we've got on the ground. I think you're doing a real fine job at defining that. And I think that you've got some solid ideas. You may want to share with council, some of the top 2 or 3. You talked about street sweeping. We talked about the other day the 5-acre pond that's right over here by Food Lion. Right. Cutting that in and starting to have it do its true function, which is supposed to be a filter that nobody's connected to. And, some of those that are not as earth-shattering as trying to. I don't know how you put more ponds in to collect drainage from existing neighborhoods.
Well, one of the best places to start providing water quality is along Oxford Run, because Oxford Run treats, I can think of the flow rate, I can't think of the drainage area. It treats a substantial drainage area, especially the area along that parallels City Hall Avenue. That's a perfect place for treatment. We may also be able to provide, while we're fiddling with the actual channel and providing some water quality, we can also provide some flood control maybe. If existing stormwater ponds that we are not giving credit for are retrofitted, we get credit for them. That gets a little tricky because they're under the ownership of homeowners associations or commercial enterprises, but that might be a way to do things. Same thing with the EDA pond. That was constructed before January 1st, 2006. If we retrofit it, if we get some drainage going there, we get to count it. There's like I said, replacing parking spaces with pervious pavement. That's what you see at Prime Outlets in Williamsburg, and that's what you see at Pierce's Barbecue.
How about Station 1?
Excuse me?
Fire Station 1, isn't that impervious?
I'm
I mean,
not
pervious.
sure. Some was put in there,
Part of
yes.
it, part of their parking lot.
Right, and that's one of the items we get credit for.
Okay.
So there are
Is
options.
that
Semi
Yeah.
pervious.
They did have some put in. I think they also have a rain garden there, but I'm not sure about that.
Sure, we'll take that too.
We're talking about ways to get credit. Maybe we can get credit for wetlands if a treatment measure drains to a wetland. It can be considered a treatment train where first it's treated in the pond and then it's going to a wetland and filtered again. That wetlands issue is a big deal. I'm not sure we're going to get anywhere on it, but we should. So there are some options out there. I'm hoping we get that grant because that is a full-time consultant's, this is what they can do, and they should be able to really help us on that. I can come up with some great ideas, but, there's only so many hours in the day. So to have that type of resources to devote to getting some engineering would be absolutely fantastic. And I think the grant application looked pretty good. So it's $100,000. And basically, most consultants would use that to pay for one watershed. We have 3 or 4 watersheds. But we should be able, if we're very careful about how we target the contract, we would be able to get some good work out of the consultant with that.
Do you know specifically what we do get credit for? Or is that one of those things kind of?
What we get credit for is that list that you had.
Well, I mean, specific, in other words, if we aerated certain ponds, is that considered?
We're still trying to figure out what the EPA's definition of these treatment practices are. They differ from the state's definition of treatment practices. It seems like every time you turn a corner, you get another corner to go around. But that's one of the questions the HRPDC has asked the state and the EPA.
But that'd be a pretty inexpensive fix.
Is there a point in time where all our credits come up and equal out the negatives or whatever? No,
No.
no. There's still a price tag.
I-
So credits, do they mean anything? Bottom line?
Well, shaving more money off the bottom line is going to help. Getting something realistic.
We don't know what, if we're talking about like dry ponds, or wet ponds, wetland, how much that costs or how much that is a credit?
We have these spreadsheets.
Are you talking credit in terms of dollars? Are you talking credit in terms
Yeah.
of runoff?
I was talking credit in terms of dollars.
That's what I thought. So what do you?
They're not worried about what it costs. They
So
don't
the-
have to do that under the Clean Water Act. They're just worried about getting new
Well, I'm
pollution
saying
removal.
before 2006, I think that's really the fight that we have to take forward politically and say we want credit for what we've done versus the other side of 95, which was not under the Chesapeake Bay Act. That's fundamental to the city of Poquoson, I believe, is that, the rest of the state needs to at least get them to where we are, and then we'll all go forward together. This is kind of, it should have never been passed that way.
In order to protect us legally, and when I talked about it, we need to have a really good track record of having reported back to the state and the EPA, these are the discrepancies, these are the problems. If you end up in court, lawyers always look at that. If you end up in court, EPA is going to cram it down your throat. You want to be able to say, Judge, the science is wrong, the data is wrong, the underlying basis that they started with is wrong. And here's why. And we have been telling them that for, ever so long, but nobody pays any attention to it. If you're standing in front of a federal judge saying that you pointed out to EPA
In this letter, that letter, this letter.
That's right. We sent these emails, we sent these letters, we've constantly said your data is wrong, your model is wrong, then I think you have a fighting chance if they're trying to force you into something that doesn't make sense. So from a protection point of view, we need to keep doing that. We need to keep sending in the information. This is why your data is wrong. This is the information that needs to be corrected. And that's something we can do to protect ourselves to some extent.
Okay. That's good advice. Thanks.
But the option 3 that you talked about, which I think was the one you generally summarized a few minutes, Mr. Mayor, is the one that's not fully addressing the issues. It's the best effort issue that you talked about, good faith effort.
Right.
I know everything else is in flux. One thing that's not in flux is the timeline. The 15-year completion timeline, we're already 8 months into it. And your estimate, based on that good faith effort, which again is not the complete effort, is $2 to $3 million a year, plus staff costs, plus acquisition costs, beginning in this upcoming fiscal year. That's staring us in the face, which is particularly difficult because the March deadline for submission of the more detailed stuff, right in the middle of when some municipalities will have already completed their budgets by that time. We're not alone in this, but their process is lined up in such a way that we couldn't make an intelligent, informed decision in this budget process of the year we just started because of the lack of information and the lack of clarity on 100 points or more. And it looks like we're not going to be in much better position in March of next year. But the difference will be we'll have burned through 1.25 years of the 15 years by that time.
Right, and that was one of the problems with the state coming back this summer after the budget cycle was complete and saying, you need to give us this information. On one hand, we get to control our destiny a little bit by having some input. The flip side is the money we put aside this year, which would have gone to start planning that first project, get something in the ground, is going to be used to meet the state's information requests. And what it does is it puts us back a fiscal year in getting started. Hopefully what we'll be able to do is fiscal year 13, starting July 1st, 2012, is put something in the ground while we start planning everything else out. But basically what they've done is they've put all the localities behind schedule. Now the larger localities with more money are hiring consultants right now. I think York County was hiring another staff member. But the smaller localities are just kind of floundering and doing the best they can because the resources aren't there.
Well, again, we don't know what the state says that they're arguing with the EPA about their timeline going in. We don't know what that is, but I can tell you, I don't feel like we should just rush out there despite trying to get something in the ground next year. We need to make sure that what we put in is still of value and that you're actually getting a return on it.
Right.
And I feel like, to Wayne's point on, making sure that we're doing what is reasonable for the city size is to continue to present the information, formulate the plan with the grant money, and come up with real dollar costs of what it'll be. And is it $3 to $4 million a year to improve something that's already at least in the ground, but you got to make improvements. You know, and maybe that can be the project that you use to get yourself back on track.
Right.
Okay, that allows you to do that and another major thing. But if we're talking about buying a street sweeping truck, okay, is that any different than what we're going to look at tonight as far as buying another debris truck? And what's the return on that? Okay, if we're going to buy a street sweeper or sub it out, either one, you know, what amount of return do we get for the street and sweeping the streets more often? That seems like it's all low dollar fix, but again, shows that we're engaged on making the difference without sinking $3 to $4 million in the first year because we're afraid of what's coming downstream. So that's you know, that's where I'd like to see us go. Is do the low cost things. I mean, we can always clean our streets, and that's always well received anyway.
We also need to carefully document the fact that the primary reason we're buying that truck to sweep the streets is to meet EPA.
Absolutely. And we need to be very good about that record keeping.
So we can show, you know, this is what we've done, these are the questions we've asked, okay? So that when the day comes when we need to have a showdown, okay, there's a clear paper trail, okay, for what we have asked, okay, what we understand, what we don't understand, and what we have done.
Agree 100%. Everything that we do from this point forward, whether it's the small improvement that we're doing over here with Oxford Muse or the debris truck, we need to start collecting those as credits right now.
They need to be filed and indexed and have a mechanism to get back to them, and on this date we did this, on this day we did that. And if you don't do it now, it's just going to be a huge undertaking
To recreate it.
Some type of manageable data system at a later time. You need to be building that data file now.
And the state is late giving us this tool, but the spreadsheet you have, you can manipulate that somewhat. I can play with that some, but it's very rough. They're supposed to give us something called VAST. Maryland has something called MAST. That is supposed to be, we're supposed to be able to input our data in there and use it to show what we're doing. So we're going to have to do reports. We have to do an annual report for our stormwater permit now.
Okay.
So we have some reporting means to the state, but in-house documentation would obviously be a great help. And the other thing about these costs I'm talking about tonight, this is still so preliminary that, you know, they're just flying all over the place at this point.
Well, another thing too, is some of the older subdivisions that back when they used to use good engineering, where you wanted to get rid of the stormwater as fast as you could. Some of the older subdivisions that have curb and gutter have 2 or 3 outfalls. I would think it'd be fairly inexpensive that if we put something at those outfalls, like the Filterra, I'm not advocating Filterra because there's one out there that's much better than that. But if we pick those subdivisions where they drain directly into a body of water, we could put the better system in that outfall.
Right.
And I'm sure we could get credit for that.
Is that an expensive thing, or is that just filter cloth, or what is that?
No, it's a little bit more complicated than that.
You collect debris from it, and then you have to pump it out with a Vector truck, some of these. I've actually talked to some vendors about the fact we need some sort of prefabricated treatment devices like that. And really with our roads, we don't want ponds right up against our major streets because there's going to be some storm that's going to have more rain than our ponds have capacity for. And we're going to shut off our roads that way. So we've already been talking about that some with VDOT and with manufacturers to try to get some product options out there.
Okay, so that's a good addition to the list of what we can, like I said, I think we take off with some baby steps. When we start documenting, then we wait for all the political churn and all the realism of costs to catch us. But that doesn't mean we're not doing anything. So, especially if you.
Budget, Mr. City Manager, are you thinking $2 to $3 million?
I don't know, it's a little early to put the budget in, but I plan, that is probably the defining question for our budget. Schools have their own defining question, but we're supposed to come back to you later this fall with a discussion about how you might raise some of this money, but it is the issue. And I really don't know, Frank. I mean, we're going to have to address it.
If we put it in, I think what you're talking about doing is a stormwater fee. Okay?
More than likely.
Okay, so the bottom line is, are we ready to go there yet? Or do we want to wait? Now, that's just something we all need to think about.
We need to get on the other side of October. We need to get the reactions to that. And there's a lot of time between now and then, but
I've already taken the notes as far as firing off 2 more letters, one to the federal government and the one that you've already kind of prepped, and I just haven't had the time to clean up. A lot more going.
you'd like to think if we were going to have to ask our citizens to come up with this kind of money, first of all, that it would be something that you all actually wanted to do, thought it was important for our community as a highest priority. But that you'd like to have something that actually advanced the ball for things that are of primary concern in the city. And while the Bay is important, everybody knows that and agrees to it, we also have a school system which is going the wrong way, and numerous other things, including tax relief for our citizens, that are issues that we're thinking about. And this, to model just for a moment off James City's number, which is not our number, because we don't know what our number is. We're talking about for a family of 4, that's $2,000 a year. For some people, that's as much as they pay in real estate tax.
Stop thinking about $500 per household. It's per capita. Whatever we do is going to be per capita. So large families are going to get penalized more than small ones.
I think you have to do the fee.
It's going to go across the board.
It won't be per
Okay.
capita,
But bottom line is the cost will be.
Yeah.
So for a family of 4, it's X. For a family of 3, it's X. And it may all get shared, but it's not a small dollar figure.
No. Even
A
if
couple $100 a month.
even if Ellen's initial estimate is pessimistic by 2/3, we're still talking about a significant number.
Well, the $500 per capita per year includes septic tanks for James City County. The other thing is to think about is how do we encourage redevelopment so people come in and do redevelopment, and while they're doing it, provide more water quality on the redeveloped sites. The more that can be done, if development ever comes back, the more that can be done by developers, the less it's causing citizens. But anyway,
Development's coming back.
when it comes,
Oh, it's in the cost of their food.
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And
products go up.
Yeah, whatever.
And can I? Sure. Mr. Krieger, in further response to your question, as we did last year, prior to my developing the budget and giving it to you, I'm going to come back to you all with a series of, these are the 3 or 4 things I need some direction on, and I'm going to ask you, as a council, to give me some direction on how you want to treat that in the budget. So when you see it in my budget, it won't be for the rest of the time, because I will be following whatever directions you all have given me previously.
Well, and we should know a lot more coming out of October.
I sure hope so.
Hopefully that, Ellen will get, have more
No,
information.
that's not bad at all. And use a vacuum truck.
Answers from.
It basically collects it in a box. Right, but
I certainly hope
I say
so.
it's nothing but a box. It just kind of collects everything, and you go and pump it like a septic tank.
I'm just making a positive statement. I know the bottom, I know the answer, but
But let's be hopeful.
Do you want 5 minutes of transportation planning?
It's 12 till. I suggest we
I say
reschedule it.
we'll defer that to the next meeting, unless there's something on here that you want us to think about between now and the next meeting. You've written a pretty good document as far
Well,
as,
what I include,
you've lined
what
it
you
up.
received today is probably a better understanding of how staff rank the transportation projects. This is not a scientific ranking. It is not done, with any traffic counts. Kevin Wine is here. He's our new principal planner. Kevin's going to start attending the HRTPO meetings.
He drew the short straw.
So I just wanted you to know that I'll be helping him with the technical issues, but he's going to be the one at the regional board. And we'll be bothering Teresa Owens for the accounting information. So you can go through the document, basically.
can you add one more column on there?
What?
You've done great as far as safety and all that stuff. Is there any positive economic development factor that goes to each one of these options?
We actually have that in
Just
the
miss it?
thing that you got today, not what was in your brochure.
Okay, I didn't look at that.
Some of the ranking factors didn't get in there, and I apologize for that.
You're saying on improved cities' appearance or something?
We have
Oh.
promotes economic development.
Okay. Good.
And Cliff was going to be here, but he's taking his daughter to college. One thing that we asked is where are most of the accidents in the city? And most of the accidents in the city occur in the commercial area near the intersection of Wythe Creek Road and Victory Boulevard. Most of them occur because people are making left-hand turns or trying to go directly across the road. Those are where most of the accidents are. The project that was rated the most difficult was, or the most wanted by staff was probably the Layden Way, Poquoson Avenue, Little Florida Road intersection. One other concern that was brought up that had not been mentioned previously was crosswalks that were located in areas with limited visibility. There's one that's pretty much on a blind curve, and that might be something that you want to push up. If you can't move the crosswalk, maybe eliminate it for now and discourage walking, across a blind curve, basically.
I have a question about that. In the literature here, I don't see where we had any accidents.
Nobody.
Essentially, the primary one is safety.
I would defer to Cliff on that, and also look at the comprehensive plan. I think perhaps the safety ranking, the higher for Layden Way, for that intersection came out to the potential for a really serious accident there. Some of the staff members said that high speeds were a real issue there.
I didn't understand exactly what these numbers meant, like safety, when you say with the chapter 36. I mean, is that a raw number?
I can give you-
something, or percentage, or is it one you picked out of a range of numbers, or?
We had about 6 people sitting around who ranked, and we got some comments and input from a couple other staff members. 5 meant they felt it was the highest level of importance. 1 meant they felt it was not an important, or the
What was
improvement
the top
didn't
number
help.
again? I missed that. The highest number
Was 5. So,
okay, so
We're
then
seeing-
you added up from the
yes,
number of members.
and I can
you
do a
had.
better job
So it's
giving you some background.
1 through 5 times how many ever members?
Right.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So this is a much bigger survey than the department heads and stuff like that.
We got Cliff involved. We got emergency management.
Okay.
We got somebody from Public Works there.
Okay.
And this was based on what they
Schools.
believed from their experiences,
Right.
on what was important, what wasn't ranked 1 through 5.
Right. This is all, it's very subjective. As Kevin pointed out, we had Steve Pappas there from the schools. Kevin and Debbie were there from planning. So we tried to get a lot of voices giving their opinions.
Two things, oh, go ahead.
Do we have a number for the actual accidents in each location?
Cliff does. There's some older data in the comprehensive plan, which was done in 2008.
Anybody else have any questions? If not, two things I'd like council to kind of be prepared to come to a consensus next week. One is, I know we've talked a lot about the various tools to control intersections. We need to stick a fork in the age-old question of roundabouts or traffic lights or whatever. Pro, con, but we need to be able to feed to staff what is an acceptable thing to council. Don't let them go out there and bring us back a roundabout and then 5 of us vote against it, okay? So, but it's time to have that, stick a fork in that question. The second thing would be on Victory Boulevard. How do y'all feel about whether it's going to be 2 lanes for a long period of time, like the next 20 years, or do you think there's an immediate need to go to 4 lanes? Okay, those are 2 questions I think that is bothering the staff, that they're not exactly sure how to please us, and that we need to kind of have a fundamental discussion amongst ourselves with them listening on, what's the consensus of the group. Is that fair?
One of the things that really came out to me when we watched that web presentation was, this guy's probably the most renowned roundabout designer in the whole country. And I noticed that where they had thoroughfares, where they did not want to slow traffic down, they bypassed the roundabout. So where we're talking about putting this thing is a major thoroughfare, where we want people to be able to get in and out of town quickly. And why would we throw an obstacle in front of them? It was obvious from his presentation.
How did you bypass it?
They built 2 bypass roads around it, so they didn't have to go through it.
You were going straight.
So if you're going straight,
Mess with the traffic.
yeah,
Okay.
you didn't have to go through it, you just kept on.
They had a lot of money.
Thing that struck me.
But that was out in the middle of nowhere.
Would require a tremendous amount of land.
Oh, God.
And
Right.
particularly if
Right.
you try to put it in where we've got businesses and so forth going right now. you get-
Like I said, try to come to a consensus next week so we can stick a fork in that issue. And just always keep in mind that traffic lights are obstacles too. Okay?
I went around the one on Thimble Shoals just this afternoon.
You went through the traffic light?
Just just
Did that against the law?
Was it red or green when you went through it? All right, thanks.
Distracted for
Anything else? If not, we'll adjourn to the regular meeting.